All right.
Real quick, I want to say something real quick. Shout out
Go
to
ahead.
Freddie and his Philadelphia 76ers. I know they right now about to face a brutal Boston Celtics team. So hopefully, he gets to see his team combat against the Celtics and be a good series.
Zay, I hate to break it to you, but I don't believe that Fred is a 76ers fan. I just think he repping the Eagles. He an Eagles fan. But yeah, I mean, the 76ers are going to need all the luck they can get in order to beat the Boston Celtics, right? Because I think that series is going to go not very long, just for good measure there. But anyway, let's move on to the NFL right here. As you all know, a lot of stuff happened over the weekend, including some trades, right? And we knew we was going to expect some trades. I thought there was going to be more trades on draft night, but most of the trades were, outside of draft night. I'm talking about actual trades, nothing to do with the draft itself, right? So let's talk about it right now. As you all know, DeAndre Swift is on the move. And we're going to talk about that right now because the report is DeAndre Swift told the Lions he did not want to play there after the Jahmyr Dibbs pick. Do we feel better or worse about the Lions post NFL draft? Because you do know, and if you watch this show, a lot of us here on the show like the Lions, right? We do, and you know, this is a debate show, and not only is it a debate show, we really look at the game differently, right? That's how it is, right? Zach, myself, Cuzzo, me, you, Zay, we all look at the game differently. But one thing that I can say that we see the same and share is our passion for the game and how we feel about the Lions, right? So now, with these moves, the Andre Swift trade, with the NFL draft, do we feel worse or better about the Lions? And say the mic is yours.
I feel a little worse than I felt initially before prior to the draft with about the Lions. I just don't I question a lot of the picks that the Lions had. I thought they had more dire needs than the players that they drafted. Um, I thought that the Lions would focus more on their defense as they gave up, I think, the most points in the NFL this year. If I'm not mistaken, I could be mistaken. Their defense wasn't really good in the early half of the season. Second half, they picked it up. They lost their best corners. They lost the running back and Jamal Williams, but they signed one, so I thought they were fine in that regard. I know there was a lot of turmoil that happened behind the scenes in regards to the Lions, guys getting suspended, things in that nature. Also, there was reports that DeAndre Swift was not signed back with the Lions, so they wanted to get some compensation for him, and that's why they moved him. The pick I like the most out of everyone that the Lions drafted was Brian Branch. He was I think the best safety in the I believe in the draft, if I'm not mistaken, the main like true safety in the draft. And I think that's gonna help them pay dividends right away. I think it's an immediate day one starter for them because they don't really have nobody out there. But other than that, I'm questioning all the moves that they made in regards to the draft. Jake Campbell, Jahmyr Gibbs, Sam Laporta. Those are the first three picks they had. I'm just confused on where they were going with them. I believe, if I'm not mistaken, Michael Mayer. I believe Michael Mayer. That's the name. I think he was available, and they didn't draft him. I think he was regarded as one of the better tight ends, if the top two in that draft class, and he wasn't even selected by them. So I think for me, I didn't have high hopes with this draft, and I hope I'm wrong. The Lions have shown that they're able to develop guys and get them into a good standing the last 2 years recently. So I'm hoping that they do something with these guys, but I don't see it, off the rip. It seems like a lot of reaches in this draft that I know wasn't a highly touted draft class. I just don't like anybody that I don't like most of the Lions picks, in my opinion, or that DeAndre Swift trade to the Eagles. Nonetheless, you traded them in within your conference. I just wasn't a fan of it.
I mean, look, right? Ah, if you ask me right now, which clearly I do have to answer the question, I would say I feel around the same that I did prior to the draft. Now, after the draft, I feel the same. And I guess if I really had to, go worse or better, I'm actually going to, believe it or not, say better in a weird, funny way. And I'm going to see, based on my dialogue here, if I'm going to end up with the same answer, right? Because I think for me, the Lions are taking it's not 1999 anymore to a whole nother level. Right. And I understand that's why we named the show. It's not 1999 anymore, aka 99 Pod, because in this era of sports, in this era of society, a lot of things have shifted, right? It's not the same life or sports universe that you thought when you were watching the game in the 80s and 90s. Things change, the game progressed, the game evolves, right? But I do think there's certain things from those times that still remain prevalent to today. And we always pay homage to that while talking about how the game changed, right? And how the shift is shifting, right? And I think for me, they're taking this to a whole nother level. Like they are literally reinventing the wheel. When you talk about the draft picks that they made, the Jamal, I keep saying Jahmyr Dibbs pick, right? With the Jack Campbell pick, two devalue positions that you can find later on in the draft. The inside linebacker, they don't really impact the game from a defensive standpoint because of all the spread out offenses around the league. When you talk about Gibbs, right? And I guess maybe the good thing about that pick, because when you look at their draft and you look at the players that they got, right? They got, Hendon Hooker. They got the quarterback. They got a tight end and Sam Laporta, right? I know I'm pronouncing names. That's not my specialty here. Jamal Gibbs, Jack, Campbell. When you look at those picks and ignore where they were drafted at, it's a good class. Like, it's not a bad class. I think we are underrating the class, but the value of where they drafted those guys is throwing us off. But if we ignore that and look at the class and how that can impact the team this year and going forward, then it's a really solid class. And yes, it's not the class like last year where I thought they won it when they got Aiden Hutchinson, the best defensive player in the draft, at that time. When they got Jameson Williams, who, if he didn't tear his ACL, he was potentially going to go number one as far as wide receivers, right? So it's a different look, this class, but I still think it could remain effective to the team. You see, the Lions, they are not going to be the same next year. They're not. And I think we need to realize that. Now, that doesn't mean they're going to be worse. That doesn't mean they're going to be better, but they're going to be different, right? Because you talk about three foundational pieces that they moved on from that helped them build the team to where we respect it. Build a nice team that caught the media's eye. Everybody sipping the Lions Kool-Aid, right? But they traded TJ Hawkinson, foundational piece, right? They traded Swift, right? Who we're talking about right now, foundational piece, right? They traded Jeff Okudah, who they drafted with a top 5 pick, foundational piece, right? They traded Jamal Williams, who led the league in touchdowns, who was the heart and soul. That's like the Warriors trading Draymond Green, right? So they're going to look different,
Mm-hmm.
but I don't think different means it's necessarily going to be bad.
Mm-hmm.
That's the thing. And I think when you look at their draft moves, I think that Tennessee kid, that quarterback, can be a guy, especially after Jared Goff, plays out this year. Maybe he's the guy that take the reins from the team. So
Mm-hmm.
I think their draft was good, ignoring the value. I think Jamal Gibbs is a guy who can take check downs and turn them into touchdowns. And I think this team, to answer the question, despite the Swift trade, which I really don't agree trading a guy within conference. And that's another thing before I pass the rock to you
Mm-hmm.
is these trades within division and conference, right? The TJ Hawkinson trade was in a division. You don't do trades like that. The Jeff Okudah trade was in a division. This trade was in a division. Can you trade them to the AFC, please? You know what I'm saying? But it's very non-conventional. It's reinventing the wheel. It's
Mm-hmm.
taking 1999. It's not 1999 anymore to a whole nother level. And we'll see what happens with them going forward.
Like I just for me, like it just like I feel like they should have went with a cornerback if they was going with what they needed. I thought they should have drafted a cornerback, and I think one thing that the draft usually hits on is getting a corner for your future, and that's the guys that usually stay a long time are the cornerbacks. Those are the guys that are valuable, the positions that are most valuable. Christian Gonzalez is on the board still at 12, and you didn't select him at a position of need. You selected a running back, a position that wasn't of need. Even you could have traded up and got him at 17. You traded Jack Campbell, excuse me, at 18. Not saying he's a bad player, but it wasn't a position of need. You could have drafted a linebacker later in the draft, like you did last year. You got Rodrigo in last year's linebacker draft, and he winds up being one of the better linebackers in the league in terminations of pursue tackles, tackling in general. He's a solid linebacker, and you drafted Jack Campbell early on. And I'm not saying he's a bad player, but is he going to be a difference maker on that defense? You needed a corner. Despite your pass rush, you needed a cornerback, and you didn't get one. And that was interesting. You got Brian Branch, who's more of a safety, and probably going to play my slot corner because they're not going to. They don't have anybody else really on that defense in terms of cornerback. So it's something that the Lions, they didn't address their needs right away. They thought that they needed a running back early on. I feel like that wasn't a dire need. I feel like you should have drafted a corner at 1, at 12. If anything, you should have drafted a corner at 18, but you didn't. You went linebacker, running back. And I just don't really see their vision of what this defense is poised to be, because they're mainly focused on they were mainly clearly focused on replacing DeAndre Swift and then sending him to the place he wants to go. And I feel like that was the wrong thing to do. They let Jamal Williams walk for a cheaper price, for a real cheap price. I thought it was an expense. I thought he wanted a big bag. He walked for a cheap price. And I'm like, so why the hell didn't you bring him back if that was the contract he wanted? It's just a lot of questionable things that Lions has done this offseason in this draft. Last year I thought they did extremely well with drafting. They did extremely well with the offseason. And last year, and then this year, I feel like it's a complete 180. They're going back and reverting back to their old Detroit Lion ways. And I just don't like the way it's looking from right now. I could be completely wrong when training camp comes around, when the season starts. But right now, from an outside looking in, it doesn't look like a team that has changed its ways. You got guys getting suspended for betting, not even players, coaching staff. It doesn't look like y'all made the positive journey towards being successful. It just looks like you're dismantling young kids. You're messing up young kids' futures. It doesn't look good.
I think for me, right? And like I said, I'm in the middle, but I lean towards I think they are going to be better than what I initially thought going into the draft. And I think for me, it's a lot of factors that play into that. Number one, I think we could all agree that they're going to look different. And like I said before, in my last lap, different could mean worse or it can mean better. Like, they build one of the things that we attracted or the Lions attracted us to them was off of their ability to play hard, that rah passion. I mean, you saw Jamal Williams' speech at the end of that Packers game. Like, you want that guy in your locker room. You want him in your locker room. That's a guy that you would love to play with, right? So that's one of the things that attracted me. I know for myself, it attracted me to them. The fact that even 2 years ago, when they were losing and losing and losing and losing, those games were competitive and they were playing hard in games that they was supposed to get ran out the gym, right? And then last year, they started off slow, but then they went on a streak and they were one of the most scariest teams to play towards the tail end. That's what we loved about this team and how hard they played and the passion, the hard knocks, everything, right? And I think they traded some of those guys that helped build that. And I'm not sure if it's because they want to go younger. Like, think about the Swift trade. He's a young cat, right? He's only like, 25, 23, something like that.
Okay, yeah.
I think he's in between there, right? He's still young. But in NFL years, that's old. Like, especially when you played, a couple seasons in the NFL. That's really old. Like, your prime in the NFL as a running back is literally your first 3 years. You can get good football, prime football, your first 3 years as a running back. But chances are, after that third year, as we saw with Ezekiel Elliott, you don't run as hard, your tires start to fall off. So maybe they wanted to offset the running back, how can I say it? Not market. Market is not the word, but they wanted to offset the running back basically and get a fresher back with fresher legs. And Jamal Gibbs, like I said, I like the pick. I like the player. I just don't like the value in that. But at the end of the day, when these players touch the field and if they make impacts, we are not going to be reflecting about the value. We're not going to go back and say, oh, he's nice, right, in the middle of the season, but why did you draft him at that pick? We're not going to talk about that. We're going to be like, yo, this kid is a stud, right? And I think when you talk about the Bengals, I want to reference them because a couple years ago, they had a very unconventional, unorthodox draft where they took Jamar Chase outside of a positional need at the offensive line, right? When we saw Joe Burrow nearly died, his career nearly ended early because he was getting sacked on every play, and they went for the weapon. And everybody's like, how you could go for the weapon and not for the lineman? And then they was the only team to draft a field goal kicker. And that field goal kicker that they drafted ended up winning the playoff games off his legs. And guess what? They went on a Super Bowl run. So I think the Lions, although very unorthodox, even more unorthodox than what the Bengals did when they went on their run, it's not 1999 anymore. Like, maybe they have something up their sleeve. But I think we have to wait and see how that plays out. But for now, I'm going to say I do feel better with a grain of salt about where they are post NFL draft and DeAndre Swift trade.
Okay. Please like and subscribe for all the up-to-date content. We've been slinging shows left and right, slinging content left and right. Please don't miss anything. If you do, like, subscribe, leave a comment, leave a question, something you may want to answer, something you may have. All ideas are great ideas. Nothing's a dumb question.